So hi and welcome everybody to another edition of In Conversation with Sticky Eyes, where we discuss some key trends and digital marketing development within the team. Today, very topically, we are talking about Black Friday, which we all know is a massive milestone in the retail calendar. I am joined by a few of our fantastic Biddable Media team. So we have Sarah Barker, who heads up the team. We've got Rebecca and Tom, who also work with Sarah. Now, they all have a wealth of retail experience. We have been working for a number of clients in the space for a number of years. So the likes of French Connection, with Brora, with Science in Sport, and with Hunter, who recently we've been shortlisted at the Drum Search Awards for amazing results with Google Shopping. So without further ado, we shall get started with our Black Friday in conversation. And I think the first question that we were going to talk about was, obviously, we know Black Friday is a major date in the retail calendar, as I've just said, but it's going to look a bit different, we think, this year in 2020. How do we think that we see retailers and brands approaching the sales period, do we think?
Yes, certainly. I think things are going to be so different this year, especially seeing as how things have changed throughout 2020. I think with restrictions such as social distancing measures and things being in place, that's really changed the landscape. We've definitely seen consumers and brands starting to move even more reliance towards e-commerce and online retail. And so that's going to be really important. And I think as a result of that, we'll see huge levels of competition this year, like we haven't seen before, as more brands start to put more reliance online and really start to try and increase their visibility.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think this year has been very different with some of the really big hitters and big players in e-com reducing the budget quite a lot throughout COVID. Most notably, I think Amazon, from the activity that we've seen across our clients. The reduction of bidding in Amazon has meant that we've benefited from some really cheap CPCs throughout the year. But I think I'd expect these retailers to come back a bit more consistently and maybe a bit more aggressively in the SERP with potentially higher budgets throughout this Cyber Week than any Cyber Week we've had before. I think the logistical issues as well that come by trying to promote the Black Friday sales in store this year, in particular, trying to navigate for retailers with the different lockdown rules and the different tiers in place in different regions, trying to put strategy across the board is going to be really difficult. So I certainly think there's going to be much more focus on the online presence and the online shopping this year.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, because we've noticed across quite a lot of our retailers that we almost have like these little bursts or regional bursts, depending on how the lockdown rules are changing. So I would imagine it might be kind of Yorkshire area soon, because no doubt Leeds is going to end up in tier 3. But the general trend, I would say, is when an area goes into lockdown, you suddenly kind of see a bit of an online burst where, non-essential shopping is restricted. So we have to be super, super reactive to kind of, make those bid adjustments and budget changes, and probably check the sensitivity of your messaging and things like that when it happens. And that's kind of on a UK scale. I guess we do tend to have kind of quite a lot of global clients now. So if you are a brand that is global, you probably need to also think about, France, Germany. Are there particular territories at the moment where you need to slightly tweak your strategy? Are you using kind of Google My Business, sending people to locations that they just can't go to at the moment that are open? So we need to be super, super reactive and have that kind of really local approach. And I'd recommend that your teams are constantly doing that market landscaping to understand actually what is happening in the different territories. And I guess that what kind of comes along with that as well is just assessing your channels, because I think what people are actually doing is so different now than they had done previously. Like, for example, I've become a huge Pinterest fan since I've been locked down, probably something to do with buying a new house. But I think people are just kind of, on their phones, on their laptops a little bit more than they previously would have been, dual screening and stuff. So maybe you kind of previously got down, I work on search and social and nothing more. Well, actually, could you try a bit of Spotify or AdSmart or Pinterest? Something a bit different to kind of add into your channel mix that's really, really suited to these new lockdown rules, I guess, that might kind of enhance it, particularly kind of on the awareness side as well.
Yeah, I think, Tom's made an interesting point. I was just making a few notes there in terms of the lower CPCs. And my next question was going to be about, do we think there's a pressure on retailers to read the mood of consumers. So obviously when those lower CPCs that you mentioned, Tom, were earlier in the year, obviously lots of people didn't think it was appropriate. I know there's been lots of discussion in the market about what was appropriate in this kind of in the advertising space. I know lots of people are thinking about it as they head into Christmas. So we're going to see like the normal happy families all together in huge global ad campaigns, maybe not. So do we think there's pressure on the retailers to kind of read the mood, so people might be a lot more conscious about spending at the moment, specifically over Black Friday? Or do we actually think there's loads of pent up kind of demand that Black Friday is going to be kind of more popular than ever?
Yeah, I think this is a particularly interesting point for us. I think, it's very hard to anticipate how the mood is going to be heading into Black Friday. There's a lot of people who, like you point out, have potentially had lower confidence in spending throughout this year, and potentially, with what we've seen across furlough and a lot of redundancies throughout this year, potentially just have less disposable income heading into the back end of this year anyway. I think in particular, the impact of COVID has led to people maybe not wanting to invest too much in the high ticket items this year and look for a bit more security in the spending. But then again, it could be that those people are holding on to the kind of funds or the plans to buy on those sort of items and looking to actually invest that in Black Friday when it might be a little bit cheaper, or we might be able to get those discounts. I think, like I say, it's hard to completely predict which way it's going to go, but I think personally I'd expect the demand to be a lot higher on Black Friday this year because of some of the points that have been pointed out already about, some of the brands having a lot more online presence this year over the physical presence because of COVID and because of the different restrictions that might be in place in certain regions. I think particularly as well, we're expecting to see quite a growth in gifting demand as well, with a lot more people wanting to do online gifting. Obviously, we're not sure what the situation will be like over Christmas as well. So online sales for sending gifts to people should see a bit of a spike this year as well. So I think that combined with people potentially wanting to do a bit more bargain hunting this year with less disposable income to hand might just make this one of the most competitive cyber weeks we've seen for recent years, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it goes a little bit back to what you were saying as well earlier, Lisa, around kind of that sensitivity. It's a really hard line to kind of walk when it comes to marketing, because on the one hand, you want to really tailor your approach to your audience. But at the moment, your audience is in the middle of a kind of, international pandemic. So you want to kind of gear your advertising to that situation, but without seeming like, you're capitalizing on misfortune or anything like that. So I think it kind of comes back to, reassessing your messaging, and just kind of understanding who you are as a business and being authentic. I've seen kind of a lot more ads on TV, people doing like FaceTime ads and things like that. I'm sure there's one, what's she called, from Desperate Housewives, doing kind of the L'Oreal ad or whatever, kind of from home, like the at-home kits and stuff. And I think stuff like that is really, really relatable, because people are in similar situations. So it's kind of playing messages to those kind of situations that everyone's in without kind of being a bit distasteful, I guess. So yeah, if you can kind of identify values that really mean something to you as a brand and it's kind of authentic, they're the messages that you should be trying to connect with people on that personal basis. So for example, like local family businesses, it makes sense for those, in their ad copy, in their Facebook ads and stuff like that, to be talking about, we're local, we're family owned, because that's where people are wanting to probably spend their money a little bit more, to support those particular areas. Or, if you do have kind of incentives and things like that to support people, around coronavirus, or you're kind of offering products that will complement people's new way of working or lifestyles, I think it's fine to do that in a kind of authentic way that you normally would, and not kind of forcing anything that's too markety, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree on the messaging side of things. I think that's going to be really important during this Black Friday. And I think just to add to that, not just around what kind of messaging you're using, but just consistency too. So in the build up to Black Friday and during this lockdown period, I know people have been using much more understanding and sensitive messaging, and we shouldn't completely lose that just because we're going into a key promotional period. And make sure that you are being consistent with that kind of messaging, and being understanding of the audience.
Yeah, I think like Sarah said, it is a fine line to cross, isn't it? Because I know there's been a lot of discussion in the kind of marketing press, like I said earlier. And I think we also, some of us can get a bit fed up of, we understand, we're all in it together. And I think that's facing a bit of a backlash now, isn't it, as well? So it is going to be really interesting to see what retailers like you say, the messaging and how it's developed over the kind of like Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend. We will probably do a bit of a review on that, I would have thought. So we'll share it when we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that.
I was just going to say on that one as well, it's probably really important for your media teams to be really in touch with like your brand teams to understand like what is the core message that they've decided to push as a brand. So you're not going off direction in your paid search or your paid social and everything is super aligned with that sensitive message, you know, because at the end of the day, the brand teams are the ones that kind of really build that tone of voice and stuff. And it's our responsibility as, you know, media agencies or media teams to get that out to consumers. So it just needs to be super, super aligned in that way.
Yeah, and that kind of segues quite nicely into my next question, because we were going to talk about long-term strategies, and I guess that is a really important element of a long-term strategy. It's something that we've talked about quite a lot at Stickyeyes in our kind of e-commerce hub, our content hub, which we will share on here as well. We have a lot of our content that talks about the importance of this longer-term strategy. So rather than just looking at Black Friday as obviously a key milestone, how would we suggest that kind of works together as a kind of retail plan of action, I guess?
I think what we probably need to kind of look at is the kind of very nature of Black Friday itself, because sometimes I think retailers put so much pressure on, you know, that one day, or I don't know, now it's probably like week or a couple of weeks, maybe before and after, you know, just to kind of drive these huge revenue numbers. You know, big targets, particularly if maybe you're in an industry that's been a little bit hard hit this year. You know, the pressure's really on in Q4 to get to where we need to be. But I also think brands need to be mindful that, you know, that time of year is purely revenue, like numbers, volume, and your margins might be, you know, a little bit tighter and that type of thing. And at times you might be paying a bit of a premium to get those particular users through if there is higher competition and that type of thing. So what you don't want to do is just kind of have a very short-sighted strategy to drive all this volume, and then it kind of just leaks from the bucket, I guess, and you've paid this money to get new users in, but then, you know, disappear over time. I guess shoppers maybe are a little bit more, I guess, promiscuous and promo-driven over that particular period. So I think when you're doing your planning now, you probably have to have, you know, a wider measurement framework in place, not just to kind of look at, you know, revenue volumes, but also do, for example, now do we have like awareness targets, you know, brand lifts, expected traffic and click-through rates and that type of thing, driving kind of those new users to then in Black Friday have, you know, targets around acquisition, new users, then probably, you know, that's when you can have your revenue numbers. But also then after Black Friday, are you doing any kind of lifetime value modeling and retention targets from Christmas into New Year? So you should be planning out that framework now to make sure that, you know, you're not just hitting, get, you know, loads of money in November, but actually let's kind of have a customer strategy for the next few months going forwards.
Yeah, I think that's really key actually, just from that retention point of view. It's so important for this, particularly this time of year. And I think just to support that, we really need to make sure that we're really considering an audience first approach. It's something that's really important just to make sure you are covering all those elements of the user journey. So have we got those channels and different types of opportunities in place to cover all of those bases of the user funnel? Have we got some specific awareness activity that we can be running to bring in those new users? And then how can we nurture them with specific messaging and different types of activity to get them through to conversion, and then also retention. So it's all about that end goal of really growing the business at the end of the day. So how can we make sure we've got all that framework in place?
Yeah, and on the audience-based approach, I think there's a lot of levers that the brands can be pulling and retailers can pull throughout AdWords. I think, you know, if you're a retailer with a relatively limited budget and maybe you want to focus on your awareness and your prospecting activity on kind of lookalike audiences for your previously high value or high LTV customers to kind of increase the chance for those customers that do come through on Black Friday, potentially hunting for deals at the time and more likely to actually turn into long-term and high-value customers throughout the rest of next year and beyond, I suppose. I think obviously it's a good idea as well to set up some remarketing activity in terms of capturing traffic that goes away from the sale pages. So obviously we'd expect a lot of traffic over the Black Friday and Cyber Week to go directly to the sale page, sort of hover around there for a few seconds and potentially either convert or leave the site from there. But anyone who does fall into that category and then goes to another area of the site, I think it's really important we're capturing that activity and seeing what other products that user in particular was interested in, where else they wanted to go, what else they were looking at. And then we can remarket back to them more effectively next year through having segmented audiences again by potentially product type or how far on site they got into the conversion process. So yeah, I think Black Friday is becoming more and more a chance to really get people into that top level of the funnel. But again, the focus is massively becoming on how do we actually make sure that these people add value to our business throughout next year and beyond, as opposed to just in the back end of November.
Yeah, I guess there's a real opportunity to find out about your audiences this year more than ever, isn't there? And to kind of find out what they're interested in and what they might go on to purchase as well. So we know that retailers will be looking at their strategy and they will have planned it hopefully way in advance. But there will be a number of kind of new features or campaign types that probably people may not be aware of or may have discounted. So from your experience working in that retail space, are there a number of kind of campaign types or features that you would recommend people look into this year?
So I think from my perspective, it's really important to be leveraging things such as automation within Google Ads. I know that that's been advancing quite a lot over the recent years, and it's just something that's become quite important and that's really made a difference, particularly from our experience across different customers and client spaces. So I think that's something that really we should be leveraging during this time, and just making sure that not only are we just using them, but we're using them in a way that's most beneficial to the client's business objectives and the brand's business objectives. So does it support the end game of awareness, for example? So if they want to run awareness activity, we could be looking to leverage things such as target impression share, or if we want to look at things such as remarketing, could we then look at things such as maximize conversions? So just making sure that we aren't just utilizing them for the sake of it, but making sure that they are towards the end goal of that actual activity, and making sure that they're most beneficial in the long run. And just to add to that as well, obviously, it's not just a benefit for that, but also because it gives us more time that we can then utilize on things such as strategy. So when we're not manually doing those bidding, we can make sure that we're actually using that time for implementation of strategy and things like that too.
Yeah, I agree. I think automation has become, absolutely huge within Biddable over the last couple of years. And Rebecca touched on kind of automated search there, but I think in terms of shopping channels as well, smart shopping has become massive over the last couple of years as well. I think essentially last year was the first year we saw really widespread adoption of smart shopping. I think a year later we're kind of becoming a bit wiser on how we can adjust those smart shopping campaigns rather than just being purely automated to drive and maximize conversions or do a target ROAS, really drive them to hit those business goals. So adjusting the shopping feed and putting a bit of work in now ahead of Black Friday and Cyber Week to kind of label up products with, these are the high margin products, these are the low margin products, these are the products that typically return high ROI, these are the products that turn low ROI, and setting up the campaigns within smart shopping off the bat to really segment those targets and those business objectives would really help to kind of hit any goals in terms of profitability that any business has throughout the season. I think traditionally we sometimes segment smart shopping by gender, but again, as I mentioned previously, the influx in gifting searches and things this year is probably going to make that slightly less reliable this year as a kind of go-to. So I think implementing all that business data in the background to really help those smart shopping campaigns drive towards your particular business goals is really going to be crucial.
Yeah, I think you guys probably agree that we've been quite surprised how much of a difference it's made when we've done a full audit of a client's feed, made changes, particularly to like those product titles, to get all the key relevant info in there, and also custom labels, because that's what's, like Tom said, going to enable you to segment your campaigns. I don't think we were quite expecting it to have quite the impact that it actually did, but it wasn't unheard of to be seeing that uplift, above 100% on certain metrics from just optimizing the feed, because now it's all about the data you're sending to Google. And if you are going to use some of these more automated type features, another one as well add to what Tom was saying is particularly around Black Friday to consider things like return rates, because you make a lot of sales on the actual day, but I'd imagine there's a good chunk of people who are intending to maybe send something back. The classic shopper now buying multiple sizes in clothes, or multiple versions of this, that, the other, or just deciding they're not happy with it when they get it and sending things back. So typical return rates on products might help to kind of alleviate that sting in December when you start to get products back that you think you've sold. And then another feature, I guess, that I've become a little bit obsessed with now, as I'm sure the team knows, is around ad customizers and if statements in copy and landing pages. Just because with Black Friday, a lot of retailers now, they don't just kind of have one promo. They'll have, a stepped promo of 20%, 30%, 50%. Black Friday runs into Christmas, which runs into Boxing Day in January. So that's like a lot of ad copy changes where you're constantly, in Google Ads editor, uploading new copy, pausing things, scheduling things. Things can easily go wrong when you're doing that. And I think as well, it can impact things like your quality scores and how smoothly your accounts are running with so much chop and change. So if you use things like ad customizers, and I guess for those who aren't already aware, they're kind of like a little parameter in your ad copy that pulls off a central business data feed in your account. And when I say feed, it's like really basic. You can just write a few bits and pieces of copy. It's not like an advanced feed. Anyone, I guess, can do it who has some basic Excel type skills. And what it will do then is kind of dynamically update with the time period, your offer, prices, or something like that, to avoid kind of loads and loads of manual changes where errors are prone. And I guess going back to what Rebecca was saying earlier, like as marketers, we've probably got better things to do with our time than just changing bids and updating copy. We want to focus on that larger strategy piece, and utilizing these kind of clever features that Google now has. They can be a little bit scary because sometimes you're like, oh, we're trusting in Google to automate things and this, that, the other. But when you consider like the value of your time, it's probably better spent, I guess, elsewhere rather than kind of doing these very computer type things.
Yeah, I mean, my last question, because we're kind of running out of time a little bit, but I don't know whether we've probably just covered it now, because there's some there was some fantastic tips to share. But I was going to say, just before we finish up, if there's going to be a key message that you send out to retailers and brands about what they need to do to get right with their Black Friday strategy, what would you suggest that would be?
Yeah, I think from my side, it is that point on automation really this year. I think that is the crucial point, and certainly something we're building into all of our search and shopping strategies that we've got with our clients. I think it would be important any year to have that automated, because as Rebecca points out, the amount of adapting to market demand and things that those automations can do in much more real time than we can do manually from our side is just way and above what we would be able to put in place. But I think this year in particular, when it's unpredictable just how much search demand is going to come in, just how engaged those searches are going to be, if they're actually enthusiastic enough to go through with that purchase on site, or if they are going to be shopping around for deals that bounce more often this year versus last year. I think it's a lot to keep up with, and I think the automated bidding strategies will really help to make sure that the campaigns are running as efficiently as possible towards your business goals, no matter what sort of fluctuations we see. And then on the back of that, we can continue developing the strategy based on the results we do see in the account to continue progressing throughout Cyber Week and into Black Friday and Cyber Monday.
Yeah, I think my key point, I guess, for takeaway would be think kind of big picture rather than small channel siloed. And I'm hoping now, it's a bit of an old way that doesn't really exist very anymore, where channels are just completely siloed and working on different bits and pieces. But the worst thing I think we could be doing is all the different teams just going out there and pumping money in to try and maximize their revenue independently of each other. Because that's when you're going to see those big Black Friday spikes and then drop off after that. We need to ensure that before Black Friday, so now really, I'd say, your paid search team knows exactly what your email marketing team is doing. You know, what is the content of those emails? When are they, you know, likely to be going out, and that type of thing? What is your TV buying team doing? Programmatic, paid social. So everyone kind of has a bit of a view of investment and messaging, because that's going to be absolutely key, not to just kind of, you know, have that boosted volume, but to create those really kind of coherent customer journeys from, you know, initial touch point through to kind of a Black Friday sale. But then you can maybe, like, you know, generate some upsells because you've, you know, got that good relationship with the user who's then going to keep coming back, you know, for time to come. And I guess in this way you're creating like a really nice flow from you know, start to finish with that particular user.
I think for me, in terms of key takeaways, would be making sure you've got that audience strategy in place. So making sure you covered the whole user journey. So have you got that strategy in place for awareness through right to retention? So you've got the whole funnel covered. And just making sure that you're really thinking about your channel mix and your actual messaging mix. So are you targeting the right audiences with the right messaging? And how is that going to go down with the audience as well? So just having that full funnel approach and making sure you really are taking into consideration your actual audience.
Brilliant. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. It's probably a topic that we could talk about all day, and there's a million things that we could probably share and suggest to people. It will be really interesting to see what happens next, to see what happens with retailers. Like I said earlier, we'll probably do a bit of a review of some of the campaigns that we really like. It's always really interesting to kind of learn from what's going on in the market. If people do want to see more, we have a lot of content, like I've mentioned, in our Black Friday content hub. So if you just search for Stickyeyes Black Friday, all of that content will pop up. We'll drop the video in there. But thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Sarah. It's much appreciated.
Cheers, Lisa.
Thank you.